What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleashed. This edition, a little bit near and dear to my heart because all three of these guys are very close to me and guys that I am very, very tightly aligned with. So, of course, let's go ahead and introduce the guest for the day. You recognize him as the co-host on the show, The Trenches, way back when I was part of Sherdog. He's also one of the top guys at Sherdog doing all the video interviews. He's one of the best journalists out there in the game that nobody is paying enough attention to. He is Captain Credential Jason Burgos. Jason, how are you feeling, brother?
I like how it was one of the best, but nobody's paying attention to. You know, truth hurts. Truth hurts. It's probably the right thing, but
I'm just saying you're underrated, man. I'm saying people need to be looking in your direction. That's all.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be with all you guys. It's always fun. I was looking at like the messages. The last time we did this like October. It seems like it was longer than that. It seems like it's been forever. You know, the handsome Ben Duffy and Jay Petrie, and then the okay-looking Anthony Walker. I mean, we've got to bring the sexy back to another level.
You know what? I see, Jason. Just when I want to say nice things to you, then you go ahead and stab me.
You said nobody sees me, so that's
no.
You don't get anything.
I'm saying you're underrated. That's all I'm saying. I'm trying to compliment you, you jerk. All right, so
hey, don't be mean to Master Sergeant Credential over there.
Yeah, right. Tell him, Jay.
It's time for somebody to get demoted.
I will leave this call right now.
No, you won't.
I just demoted you. That was Master Sergeant's below captain. Anyway, go on.
This guy gives me like a staff corporal or whatever, so I'll take sergeant, I guess. Fine.
I don't even know which one is ranked higher. But anyway, we're gonna move on to the man who's a jack of all trades, who's mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, the senior editor. Ben, how are you feeling, man?
I am doing spectacularly. It was a very interesting weekend of fights, and the year is just about out, and it's just really exciting to address kind of as a person and as an MMA fan and media member.
Yes, definitely, man. And of course, we have the panel being anchored by the man with the math, the statistician, the expert of all statistical things. He is also of Sherdog.com, Jay Petrie. Jay, how are you feeling?
I'm really looking forward to this show tonight. I'm glad we have Burgos on the team. I feel like this is a good year ender. Bring the family together for one big kaboom. So with that, I'll give you my stat of the week. The stat of the week is 30. No visual aids this time. Fedor Emelianenko has now finished 30 opponents in his career. Exactly 15 by knockout and 15 by submission. So there you go.
Balance right there. Very, very well balanced. It's like Thanos level balance. I like it. I must point out too that you have a very fly goth Hawaiian shirt on today, Jay, and we notice these things here on Unleashed.
Really, the show is just going to last until Mike Goldberg bursts through that door in the background and takes it back from him.
Hey man, it's not long sleeves though. I can't give it back to him.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into things because we do have a few things to talk about as the year and the decade come to a close. So we'll start off with Bellator's final show of the year. Now, they had that main event between. Oh, sorry, it's my son having the occasional cry.
He heard Bellator Japan. Is like, nah.
Oh, Fedor, Rampage.
The travesty of the main event between Fedor Emelianenko and Rampage Jackson. So fellas, I think I can rule out one of these answers right off the top of my head. But we have two other ones that are worth choosing from. So did the fight between Fedor and Rampage exceed your expectations, meet them, or disappoint you? Jason, I'll start with you.
I mean, you had to have low expectations going into it, I guess. But I mean, I had hoped for the best, and then, God, man, Bellator did that hype job with Rampage working with Sam Calavita, who I've talked to people that work with Sam Calavita, and they praise him highly. So I was like, okay, maybe this guy's gonna come in shape. It should be interesting. And then, nah, it disappointed. I mean, as a Fedor fan, I enjoyed watching Fedor. I thought Fedor looked good. He looked fast. He was heavier than his normal, but he's in shape. But God, man, Rampage is a damn disgusting. He wasn't even a shell of himself. He was like a soft candy shell of himself. And it was just terrible to watch. And I was fully disappointed. Disappointed.
Jay, Did this fight meet your expectations, exceed them, or disappoint you?
Well, I have to ask Burgos, did you think he was training with the Marinoviches or something? Did you think we were going to get Uber Rampage here?
Some of the guys that work with Calavita, man, they're in damn good shape. Like Cub Swanson, Archuleta, they're more shredded than a Julian salad. But this guy was not shredded at all. He like shredded cheese.
Man, yeah, this fight, as bummed as my face and voice sounds, it played out kind of how I expected it would, except with one major difference. It was the opposite result that I expected was going to happen. We've known for years that Rampage is unmotivated. He's been slowly going up in weight, just, kind of, I don't want to say phoning it in, but he's made it very publicly known that his heart isn't in the fight game like it used to be. Now, this time he had to cut weight. He had to cut weight to get to 265. And he also made that very known how disappointed he was. This is a guy who had never hit anything above 254 and change. So this was a significant difference. I expected one good boot was going to put somebody down, and that would be the end of the game. But I thought that Rampage's chin would hold out and Fedor's would fail him like it has done multiple times in the past. Yep. Frank Mir hurt him. And Frank Mir is a knockout artist when he fights Chet Congo. So, coming into this fight, I didn't think it was going to have a happy ending. I thought somebody was going to get smoked. It kind of looked bad, and we'd all wonder why this happened in the first place. But Bellator keeps on keeping on. They're going to put on these nostalgia fights at the top of these big cards that don't work and make us bummed out because we're going to watch it. And that's kind of a shame, but I understand their marketing. That the Sherdog Forum was a beehive because of the Fedor Rampage fight. Everyone was mad about it, but they were still wanting to talk about it. If I'm being a little overly critical, it felt like a step above Tito versus Chuck 3, where one guy was in it to win it. He wanted to do it, and the other guy was there for kind of a paycheck.
See, I can't quite get with that comparison because I think in Chuck Tito 3, both guys were in it to win it. It's just one guy just physically couldn't win it. That would kind of be my take on it. I'll and sorry, Ben, I know I kind of cut the order here, but it just got to get this one off my chest.
He was mad you cut Ben off.
Yeah. My son would rather hear Ben talk. So Ben, take it away, my man.
No, please continue.
All right, so yeah, like I can't say that I was disappointed with the fight or that it met my expectations or exceeded or anything. I'll say I was disappointed with myself. This fight was exactly what it was supposed to be, and I'm disappointed that I drank the Kool-Aid again, like because we know Fedor versus Rampage in 2019, just days away from 2020, is a joke. It's a joke of a fight. It has no merit in anything other than nostalgia. But the nostalgia factor was so strong. I mean, this is in Japan in Saitama Super Arena. This is leading into a New Year's card for Ryzen. Like this was a big deal on that scale. So it was hard not to get caught up in like, oh man, that's Fedor walking out there. Like, oh man, that's Rampage walking out there, and feel some sort of excitement. Like I'll liken it to when I saw Fedor fight earlier this year when he got knocked out by Ryan Bader, where Fedor walks in the room and his presence shifts everything. To see and being at Chuck Tito 3, to see Chuck walk out with the icicle shorts, to see Tito in the flame shorts, and for a second there you forget that these guys are just grossly past their prime, and this is disgusting. You just see these iconic figures and these iconic images, and it's like, oh, this is exciting. So to hear Rampage walking out to the Pride theme,
that got me.
In Saitama Super Arena,
I love that.
It's dope.
That great.
But when
Lenny
the bell
Hart,
rung,
that got me.
Yeah. And when the bell rung, it was like after the fight was over, it was kind of like, well, I mean, what did we expect? Did we expect the unmotivated Rampage, who's been unmotivated since like 2012? Yeah. Did we expect him? I don't think we've seen Rampage motivated since he lost to John Jones. And we have, like, what were we supposed to see? What was going to happen any differently. I don't, other than the other guy getting knocked out, in which case we'd probably feel equally disgusting.
No, I agree. In terms of the actual in-cage product, the only real thing it offered was a surprise. Leading up to this fight, I was just kind of playing out all the plausible scenarios in my head. And all the top 3 or 4 most likely scenarios were all depressing in their own way. The only thing this fight really offered me was it was depressing in an unexpected way. like I expected by midnight to be questioning all my life choices, but not in that particular way. So that's what I got out of it. But I'm with you in that. I mean, the whole term "Pride Never Die" has been co-opted and taken in a completely different direction than what it meant when it was first said.
Pride is dead.
But for me, the thing that dies hardest, and I said this in the column that dropped today on SureDog, it could be 10 years from now. Fedor Emelianenko could be 53 years old, 38 and 38, and I will still get a chill when he walks out and his name pops up on that Jumbotron in like the fake Russian font. That feeling is like the last vestige, the last spiritual aspect of the Pride era in Japanese MMA that, I mean, for as long as a certain generation of fans lives, will never really go away, even if we all know in our front brain that it's nostalgia value. But the actual fight, yeah, it was garbage. It was garbage, and in a rare moment that I almost never do, I flipped my pick of the fight after the weigh-ins. I don't care who looked scared at the weigh-ins, who wouldn't look the other guy in the eye at the weigh-ins, who was wearing a mask at the weigh-ins. I don't give a shit about any of that. But when one dude will not take off his shirt or face the audience at the weigh-ins, I do take that into account, especially when it is possibly the fighter in the history of the sport who is most difficult to embarrass. The things that Quentin Jackson has done without acting embarrassed for himself over the last 15 to 18 years is quite the blotter sheet. So the fact that he like kept his shirt on, turned his back to you and said, "I'm ashamed of myself," says quite a lot. So so I mean that's all the fight really offered me that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting that particular flavor of depressing.
It's a very sour flavor.
31 flavors of bummer from Bellator.
It tastes like all of the Golden Corral locations in Greater Memphis.
Oh.
Well, how do you know? Rampage knows, though.
No. Yeah, I think he went to all of them before this.
And was banned from them.
Yes.
Those were his training partners.
As a side note, I have a friend who calls Golden Corral the swollen colon, but that's just a totally different story. I had shades of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Last week watching Rampage. But yeah, we'll get into that.
That's a good question. What is worse? Because I feel like Chavez Jr. is worse because he's a young man in his prime who has more than enough motivation to do better than Rampage is. He's been through the grinder of an MMA career. You kind of almost get it in a way.
Yeah, it was a joke.
And Chavez has not done shit yet.
Yes,
that's true.
You can't get away with
right
that.
Now, Meteor Hits the Earth is one of the 5 or 6 greatest light heavyweights of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're going to bring up Chuck, you have to bring up that Quentin beat him twice badly.
Friend. Yep.
So, worse, he's probably the 5th greatest light heavyweight of all time. He has accomplished things. If he wants to cash some more checks at the expense of, like, my stupid ass laughing at him, he wins and I lose. Like, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. has done shit all.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I'm on board with Jason.
Rampage's dad wasn't cage side in looking in disgust and disappointment the way Chavez Jr. was. So
love that.
he loved it. Like, wow, someone didn't have the family get together around Christmas time. So we'll move on to the winner of said fight, Fedor. Now, swing or miss, gentlemen. Fedor Emelianenko will fight again.
Oh, like I mean, he's already amended his story since these questions went out. Now he like
real quick.
Okay, I mean, not to hawk my own wares, but in the column that I was writing that night and that dropped today, I was like, don't believe anything either of these guys say in the next 24 to 48 hours. They're both going to fight again. And Fedor even saved me the trouble. He now says he wants, around 2 more fights. The difference between Fedor and Crow Cop is that Crow Cop can't fight again. Michael Bisping can't fight again. Fedor will fight again until he can't.
No,
Man,
fair point.
He's gonna do it too, and that's the craziest thing. I'm swinging here too. That as soon as the translators said that this is the end or something, I'm running up the play-by-play for Sherdog. Kind of looking at my fingers, going, "Wait, hold on, what? That's not really happening. That's not the case." And then what? 20 minutes later, well, actually, we just meant he's not going to fight in Japan anymore in 2019. It's that kind of amendment. Like,
whoops.
Yeah. Like I was saying during the show that they're going to have to make the Barnett fight now that they have Barnett with Bellator. They're going to have to make that mess again. And if they're smart, they'd put it in a jurisdiction that isn't as aggressive. Mike Mazzulli, who travels with them from the Connecticut
Mohegan
Sun Tribal Commission, they do drug test, but they're probably not as strenuous as a state-run athletic commission. Put them in Moscow, let them do their thing, let Fedor get a win of sorts at home or whatever they want to do there. I don't want to see him fight anybody that is worth fighting, if that makes sense. I don't want to see a title aspiration journey. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see him try and fight Vitaly Minakov for some reason. I don't want to see him fight. I don't even want to see him fight Chet Congo. And Chet Congo's 44 going on 25. I don't want to see that fight. Give me Fedor Barnett. Give me Fedor versus Roy. Give me Fedor versus Vanderlei Silva. Stupid, dumb fights. If they're going to make this dumb, go all the way dumb. If Verdun tries to escape from the UFC, get him, run that back. That'll be terrible. Let's do it.
I mean, am I off base here in saying that I haven't seen Josh Barnett fight in 3 years, but if they fight tomorrow, he destroys Fedor? Like, are any of you thinking he's
right.
that dilapidated?
Based on his wrestling performance, probably.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that one, Ben. I think right now Josh Barnett runs through Fedor like it was nothing. And I don't think he can sweat.
I mean, I think I'm gonna just add on. I can't really add on anything you guys haven't said. I actually will gonna flip the question more so because we all know that Fedor is gonna fight again. But the question I was asking myself in the days after, and even Ben, and in the piece you have on him, you might have asked the same thing: does Rampage deserve to fight again in Bellator? Like, to me, the way he came to that fight was, I don't want to ever see a fighter released or pushed out, but unless it's like, maybe there's a brain damage CTE issue. But that level of unprofessionalism, I think, was disrespectful to Fedor, disrespectful to everybody in that card that, one, actually cut weight, and two, actually worked hard to be in shape like a professional athlete. Like, if not for his name, I think that would be easy. You're out of here, bro. This is ridiculous. You came in here pathetic for a main event fight. You had a cut weight to make 265. You were 205 at one time. Especially when you look at that advertising picture of Fedor and Rampage, how the Rampage version they showed, and the chocolate-covered marshmallow we got, like, it just unbelievable. So, in your guys' opinion, like, does Rampage deserve another fight in Bellator?
Deserve?
Yeah.
Did he ever deserve one in the first place? I mean, not even just to snipe at him, but the whole UFC Bellator contract situation was a terrible mess. That, remember, he was under contract with the UFC while fighting in Bellator, and then came back to the UFC to fight Fabio Maldonado at some bizarro catchweight that everybody didn't understand what was happening. If he's going to keep fighting, it's, I don't, they're going to give us Rampage Vanderlei Silva 5, aren't they?
Like, shouldn't Bellator take a stand here? Shouldn't Bellator take, at least on that level because they can afford to do it. They have other options. They don't need Rampage. They kind of need Fedor. He's still a name. He still makes the money. They can release Rampage. Shouldn't you take a stand and kind of at least on a media kind of level, like to just help better your reputation by kind of dropping for this? Like we can't have that kind of standard here. We have low standards, but we have a standard here. You know what I mean?
Maybe
The
they'll
thing is
do Quinn Jackson, Daryl Schoonover. That'll be history.
like something like that would actually aim for that.
Old titties versus new
titties.
titties.
You can't, but you can't base like Bellator and reputation just don't belong in the same sentence when Fedor and Rampage is your main event. Like you have to expect something to go wrong. Like we're talking about the home of Dada 5000 versus Kimbo, the home of
and on the same
home
card
of,
was Ken versus
Ken
Hoist.
Shamrock and Hoist. Like you're talking a level of ridiculousness that goes beyond any sort of real reputable standing when it comes to main events. And the thing about it, what I find more disrespectful about it, and I agree a lot of what you said, Jason. It's just that when you have a fighter like Rampage on the card, who's gorgeously past his prime, along with Fedor, and they just don't belong in main events at this point. But you have guys who underneath them do have the talent and do deserve that shine, and they're not getting. I feel more the disrespect towards the guys who aren't getting the shine. I don't feel that the promotion is disrespectful to the promotion itself because the promotion isn't exactly warranting any level of respect. The matchmaking doesn't warrant any real level of respect. But what should warrant a level of respect are the guys like Michael Chandler, who are also on the card, or when you have a Patricio Pitbull or a Juan Archuleta, guys like of that caliber that are consistently playing second fiddle to the Fedors, to the Crow Cup versus Roy Nelson when they're both a combined age of 139 or whatever. Like that's when you start getting ridiculous and disrespectful, in my opinion.
So you're saying like a Michael Page should be headlining cards now?
Oh,
I mean, I would take a Michael Page decimation over whoever that guy was that he fought, as opposed
Willie.
to yeah. You just substitute him for any random creative fighter, and I would take that.
An Uber driver,
just like the outline, the black outline of an opponent.
Yeah,
from parts unknown.
Like a guy who kind of looks like Ryan LaFleur. Something like that. He was just like the most generic look you could ever think of. I think you'd be more than I'd be more than happy to have a fight like that headline over a fight that the best you can expect is the sloppy old man fight that makes you feel disgusting at the end. I'll take that any day over the sloppy old man fight. All right. Oh, it's so definitive. I mean, I'll put it down with that one, huh? All right, here we go. So we'll move on. Speaking of MVP, he scored another highlight reel knockout, and he closed as a minus 900 favorite. So speaking of Bellator matchmaking, like what would we do with him next? Jay, I'll start with you.
Michael Venom Page has fought in Bellator 14 times now. Other than Douglas Lima, who sparked him, and Paul Daly, who decided to become a D1 All-American wrestler, who's the best guy that he's faced? David Rickles is the first one that comes to mind. And David Rickles was a long-time lightweight title challenger, whatever, who moved up a year or two ago. So your best guy is the Jorge Masvidal of Bellator in terms of just longevity, fought a while, didn't ever do that big thing. Respectable name, but not really a threat. I know Masvidal has done things since then. My point is Rickles is the I'm always there fighter. I've said it before. I've said it before in this broadcast. There are a number of names on the welterweight roster that he has not fought, that Page has not fought, and it's getting pretty obvious now. Like, this blast fight was sort of cobbled together at the last minute or a month ago. The fight before, he was going to fight a former lightweight Derek Anderson because reasons, and then Anderson got hurt and he was subbed in for an Italian guy who's been knocked out in the first round multiple times. got knocked out in the first round again. Who knew? Koreshkov, Larkin, Ruth, Gracie, Storley, Fitch, Rory before he moved on. There are all these names that you look and go, well, that's the top of the division. You haven't fought any of them unless you were actually forced to do so in a tournament format. You have not been matched made up to fight these opponents. They're going to make him fight Eric Silva next at this rate, and Eric Silva's like at just 21. He's a kid. Don't mess with that. I mean, if I had my way, I'd put him against a John Fitch. I'd put him against somebody that can he deal with it or not, sink or swim. But I'm going to throw one crazy one at you. Give me Raymond Daniels, Michael Page. They will be flipping and spinning and flying. Now, Raymond Daniels is like 1-1, so no commission outside of Texas would sanction that.
That sounds like an MVP opponent.
But in terms of the action, I mean, because Raymond Daniels is a very accomplished kickboxer, spins, flips, throws. He knocked out somebody with a 720 punch. So in Bellator, so he would be fun. Would it make sense? No, but Bellator's pretty much already let us know Page isn't going to get anywhere near these contenders, and that's still weird to me.
Yeah, I would like to see him against Larkin. I think I've said that
Me
on
too.
this show before. That fight, if the problem is when you have a guy in the welterweight tournament, and him able to get past Daly, even though it wasn't the most exciting fight of 2019, it still happened, and MVP still got his hand raised. You get past a guy like Daly. It's like when you start fighting guys who are 3-1 after that, it makes so little sense. It's disgusting matchmaking at that point. You have to start at least showing some level of respect to the cannon fodder that you put out there, and the guys whose skulls he's literally crushing with his knees. Like, give him a guy like Larkin who will put it on him, and you promise to see a good stand-up battle. Like, Larkin is a guy who has very good. He's a good grappler, but he's more of an anti-grappler. He's not going to have to worry about MVP's takedowns in that fight, and you'll get the stand-up war. And whoever wins, okay, throw him in there against Lehman in a rematch. I'm okay with that. But the John Fitch fight sounds like a good one to me as well. It'll be fun to see what he could do against Fitch. If he could piece up Fitch, that would be highlight reel material.
Yeah,
he could do it. If
Fitch could take him for a real ride. I don't know.
You all are crazy. You're asking the wrong questions. You're looking for the wrong things out of this. And when I say this, I understand that I am out of step with the large majority of the hardcore fans. I am out of step with 99.9% of the MMA media. And I'm out of step with my own espoused viewpoints most of the time. But ultimately, all I want out of Michael Venom Page is for him to style on overmatched dudes. Like, I can watch him knock the shit out of an 18-7, solid journeyman every weekend for the next 10 years of my life and be absolutely okay with that. I don't need him to get a title shot. I don't need him to try to climb the ladder of contention and test his takedown defense against gritty wrestlers. I don't need any of that. I mean, we're talking in the wake of a Bellator card in Saitama Super Arena. It's the weekend of Pride nostalgia. My Pride nostalgia is built on ridiculous mismatches that let some of their favorite fighters get spectacular wins over people that should never have been there in the first place. Give me Michael Venom Page versus 0-0 judoka. Give me Michael Venom Page versus a 470-pound sumo wrestler who wouldn't pass a physical even in Texas.
Give me Michael Venom Page versus Jason
Burgos. Michael Page talks a lot, but you know what he does not say? He doesn't say, I'm the best welterweight in the world. He literally says, I'm here to entertain you and put on a show. Why are we asking anything more out of him than that? Like, I am fine with the showcase and circus sideshow fights, as long as they don't interfere and get in the ladder of legitimate contention. Like, I was fine with CM Punk fighting Mike Jackson on a UFC main card because there was no question that the winner of that fight was, going to be fast tracked into a title shot. As long as the circus aspect and the legitimate athletic contests were being kept on two separate tracks, I was fine with that. So I'm fine with them continuing to match Page against people he can style on until there's just no logical way they can justify continuing to do so. If they want to have him fight Lorenz Larkin for the next title shot and a rematch with Lima, that's fine. But we've already seen what it looks like when he fights a top 10 fighter who has good striking fundamentals. He gets too far out over his front foot. The other fighter puts him like ass up with one not even that hard low kick and knocks him the fuck out. Like, why do you want to see that again unless you personally hate the guy? Are you not entertained? Just let yourself be entertained. God, if you don't like that, then why are you even watching Bellator?
Fair point.
Thank
you for coming to my TED Talk.
I agree with a lot of what Ben's saying. I think that's one great argument too. I think the flip side of that would be like Bellator kind of has to get their bang for the buck, and their audience is pretty much only diehards, and it seems like it's the diehards that are calling him, can crusher extraordinaire and those kind of things. So they got to get the bang for the buck. I would agree with him 1,000% if he already went and got his second chance, because we still don't really know about him. He lost to Douglas Lima. He lost to the champion, the best welterweight in Bellator history. So we really still don't know. So he lost to the best. So maybe he is the next best guy. He's still developing. If Bellator can find a marketable star that brings in more than just the uber diehards and the small amount of fans, they have to try to develop him into saying he's one of the best fighters in the world. And you got to fight good fighters. And as much as Ben's going to hate it, I'm going to jump on the John Fitch train too. I think John Fitch would make sense, though. I have other options because obviously Bellator is in complete protection mode. So they're not going to give him Lima. I don't think he's getting Larkin at all. And so I'm going to give some options aside from Fitch, which I think is a name you can build off of, but protected. His striking, we all know the striking weaknesses. How about a younger version of that? Naaman Gracie, I think that's a great fight. Similar kind of idea. Let's force the good grappler against him. Naaman's got a little bit better striking. And then, hey, if Naaman beats Michael Page, that builds Naaman's name. And Naaman becomes a bigger star. Maybe, who had a good fight with Rory. Maybe Naaman versus Lima down the line is interesting. Another one, the Ruth Amosov winner, I think is another good option. You gonna develop a next superstar of the division and possible title contender, because Ruth has worked his way back up after losing to Naaman.
Those guys would kill Page. Well, give him Dylan Dennis.
But
give him Dylan Dennis. Give him Joe Schilling.
But one advantage,
Dylan Dennis or Joe Schilling.
One big advantage to MVP though is that he can go out there and get murked by Ned Ruth, and we still want to see him spin kick someone to the next level of Hades. Like that,
we get a new star in Ruth. Ruth becomes a name that he isn't. Amosov becomes a name that he isn't. Or another one, Koreshkov. What about Koreshkov? He's lost 2 out of 3. He lost to Larkin. I'd watch Koreshkov. If he can knock out Koreshkov, he's legit. Give him a title shot. If not, Koreshkov, and then he builds his name. MVP can go into perfect Ben Duffy booking and just be a can crusher for forever. Yeah, the only thing I worry about is what if he's good and what if UFC scoops him up? Like, you got no value out of him. You know what I mean? Like, he could easily leave to the UFC. I don't know how many more fights he had, but he could leave. And if they didn't try to at least build him and keep him happy, maybe say, okay, we're going to build around you, make you champion. What's stopping him from going, oh, well, UFC is going to make me a bigger star and pay me more?
MVP versus CM Punk. Book it.
Make it happen, Dana.
Book it. All right, so let's move on to the best name segment in all of media history, and that is I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. That is where we share with the good folks watching what surprised us the most about the last week in fight coverage, whether it be pre-fight, the fights themselves, or anything that happened afterward. So, Ben, I will start with you. What is your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment for this week?
I've kind of already touched on it in talking about the main event this past weekend. I know it isn't terribly imaginative to talk about the main event of the only major card of the past weekend, but I did spend a lot of time thinking about the Fedor Emelianenko versus Quentin Rampage Jackson main event of Bellator 237. I pictured it out in my mind. I watched a lot of their previous fights, both during their primes and kind of in the most recent phase of their career, after, in the last 10 years after the UFC bought out Pride, in the last 7 or 8 years after, Strikeforce was gone. I watched some of their more recent fights. I kind of came up with in my head the 3 or 4 most likely outcomes of the fights. And I was still surprised by how the actual fight turned out. I'm loath to say this. I hesitate to say this. I'm not comfortable saying it, but just watching Rampage Jackson just completely quit and wilt and do everything short of just going belly down and tapping the mat. It was a startling moment. Watching that happen felt like something dying. Like, in my head, I was like, if Rampage just touches Fedor's chin and knocks him silly, and, we watch him getting the smelling salts inside of 2 minutes, Pride is dead. But it felt just as dead, if not more so, the way the fight played out. And it was a sobering moment for me, just as someone who's been a fan of this sport for about, 15 years, a little over 15 years, watching my heroes of that first generation just reduced to this. It's not a feel-good story, but it's definitely a story, and it's my I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment. I was just shocked and disappointed and depressed to see a 265-pound plus Quentin Jackson face down on a Bellator cage inside Saitama Super Arena saying no mas after one right hand from Fedor.
All right. Jay, please share with us your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment for the week.
So the Bellator broadcast gave me some thoughts, and last week I expounded upon some of them because we encountered some difficulties about trying to figure out how we'd be able to watch these bloody fights. So on weigh-in day, Scott Coker, president of Bellator, said that they would be placing all the post-preliminary fights. So the card was 6 main card fights with Fedor, and then 8 more, which they changed the rule set to Pride rules, which allows for different strikes on the ground and other different variations, open or no round by round scoring, so scoring in the entirety, a couple other nice little things. So they'd be put on the Bellator YouTube channel. Cool, fine, great, thank you. Answering the question that I asked and posed on this broadcast that actually Casey Leiden asked Scott Coker himself, so I'm glad that I inspired something. A couple hours before the broadcast, Ryzen officials said, well, actually, no, we can't. We have contractual obligations and conflicts to work through, so we can't show you these fights outside of Japan. Now, I received a little criticism about my rant because I was only targeting Bellator. It's a fair point. Ryzen shares some of the blame. It's a team effort. They co-promoted. These fights, however, were taking place at a Bellator event in the Bellator cage, using the Bellator stage to walk out, Bellator audio and video equipment, the crowd that was there to see a Bellator card. It had to fall on Bellator to some degree, because what's the alternative? Every Bellator staff member, everybody with the shirt on with a little B, sprinting out of the arena saying, you're on your own. No, that's not how these things work. So Ryzen has a hand in this, but Bellator does too. You don't look hours before an event at your contract for the first time and say, well, actually, turns out we've been mistaken this whole time. These negotiations aren't slapdash. They're not one-off deals, generally speaking. They're long, protracted negotiations, stipulations, and conditions, and everything leading into it. I know I'm glazing over. But how do you mess this up? How does everybody at every level in the process mess this up? From the broadcasters and the distributors, from the people in the arena, from the Bellator, from the Ryzen officials, every single person messed up. The international audience was unable to watch these fights in any way. I personally, and I've scoured a lot of things, have seen a couple gifts, and some cell phone footage from outside of the cage to tape one of these fights. So with Pride rules come a couple unusual things. Soccer kicks, knees to a grounded opponent. Kind of cool stuff that you'd like to see in a cage. Well, guess what? A soccer kick knockout happened on the broadcast, and nobody could see it. I am shocked that I am still shocked about this. I cannot believe that I still see this and go, how do you mess this up? I just, these events, these fights, it's 2019 and they're lost in time like tears and rain. It's not a complicated process. I know. I've been involved in some video and audio recording in the past. I'm not a broadcaster. I'm not privy to the arrangements and the agreements, but how does every single person let this go? And once it was let go, that's the end of it. That's the end. This is just, it can happen again, and it will happen again. And, my message to these promoters, get it together. We're not being that demanding as fans, as media, as whomever, asking for a reasonable way to watch your product. We cover the sport for a living, some of us. How about you, I don't know, let us cover it? So that's my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's rant.
It's amazing that we have to have this same conversation week in, week out. Just put the damn fight on somewhere accessible that we can watch it. Jason, please share with us your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment for the week.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm going in a more positive surprise based off the question and direction. For positive surprise, even though we've spent a lot of time pooping on the Bellator Japan card, I mean, there was some highlights, stuff like that. I love the broadcast. I love the look of it. For a person that's been to a fair amount of Bellator cards, the look, the presentation of entrances and fighters coming out is stale as holy moly. It's a boring look. It's a boring thing. The videos are, oof, man, some of the videos are rough. But this, I love the differences. I don't know if it was more, I don't watch enough Ryzen. Maybe it was Ryzen's, theme and style put on a Bellator broadcast, but the way the backdrop opened up, with the video and the fighters came through and all the extra additives and the lighting of the cage, it was much brighter. It felt different, it felt refreshing. Like I was watching a Bellator card for the first time in a long time, despite having some ancient people involved in the main event, and it felt different. It felt new. It felt refreshing. It felt fun. I really liked it. And then you had the nostalgia factor of Rampage's entrance and then Fedor's entrance, and it was all great. But from here on, Bellator, please, if anything, you take from this card, because there's some things you can take and there's some things you can leave to hell in Japan. Take that look. Take that new stage, that new presentation. Take it, steal it from Ryzen if it's their look, whatever. Do it from now on. It'll be better. We'll all enjoy it, and we'll have less to complain about.
I can't disagree with that. Very, very well said there, Mr. Burgos.
Oh, thank you.
You might have bumped your way back up to captain with
Wow.
that intelligent rant right there.
Wow.
Not quite.
Okay. I would expect no less from you.
So my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment is another where I shouldn't be surprised, but man, I was surprised that the commentary was so bad for Bellator Japan.
Oh man,
Is it Combate bad?
It was that night.
Yeah, I think so too.
You know what? Let me throw this out there. I told somebody in Combate about just the rough ass commentary they had in their event, and then oddly enough, the next day, Cam McLaren came out just high praising their commentary. So I don't know if that got back to him. That's what I'm saying.
So you're saying Campbell went on air and lied? That's what you said.
No, he did it on social, but
he went on social and lied because their commentary is gutter trash. Oh my god! But Goldberg and Big John, man, they did their best Combate imitation.
Yeah, they had a rough night.
That was abysmal. I think that the combination of Big John and Goldberg is pretty bad already. Like they just don't gel together or something. Like it's just not good. But they were on extra level of terrible the other night. That was Oh, that was pretty bad.
What
Why?
about that comparison Big John made between Michael Page and
that's the one.
Anderson
I was just
Silva?
about to
That's
say that.
the one. That's the
Okay.
worst
What
thing.
the
I
fuck?
All right.
almost
No.
threw TV.
All right, sorry. I've got to jump in on that one. I apologize for interrupting here.
Please, go right ahead, man.
But the thing is, you know what you're gonna get from Mike Goldberg, and I don't hate Mike Goldberg at all. I fondly admired and kind of like chuckled at what he delivered his last 7 or 8 years for the UFC, and I was fine when he moved over to Bellator and just kind of brought over all of his most like humorous.
It's virtually identical.
I'm dead. Okay. This is where you see me cutting the video in post-production and starting again 10 minutes later after I finish laughing. Thank you, Jason. No.
He's a catchphrase now.
No.
Yes.
But I mean,
He's
he's
a
a
robot.
set of catchphrases, but even in his actual play-by-play mode, you understand that he's going to toe the party line and sell you the product that's going on the screen behind him.
Yep.
Yes.
But John McCarthy, even once he moved into the Bellator booth, for the first year and change, he was a pretty straight shooter.
Yeah. Yes.
But when he said, in response to the popular criticism of Michael Page's development process, and keep in mind that I'm the guy that just went on a 5-minute rant about how great it is that Michael Page is destroying cans. So it's not because I'm disagreeing with him, but when he said that, through this point in his career, Michael Page has faced better opposition or accomplished more than Anderson Silva through the same points, I was just like, stop, like needle scratch, stereo dies at the party in the movie.
Anderson beat Carlos Newton, right?
No. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, he's better than everybody.
Michael
aside
Page.
From that
Michael Venom, whatever his actual middle name is, Page, 18 fights into his career. He has fought one top 10 opponent.
Yeah.
That opponent was Douglas Lima. He lost badly. And outside of that, he has looked really, really good against good opponents. Like, his opponents outside of his first couple fights have not been complete losers. They've been good, solid journeyman opponents, and Michael Page has made them look like losers. You can't underscore what he's done. By comparison, through 18 fights, Anderson Silva had fought Jeremy Horn, who had like 83 fights at the time. I'm not exaggerating. He had 83 fights at the time that Anderson Silva had 13. Carlos Newton, a former UFC champion.
Yep.
Lee Murray, who, personal concerns aside, is one of the great what-if stories in MMA history. Oh, and by the way, Page fought one top 10 opponent and lost. Anderson Silva fought the best welterweight in the world, Hayato Macha Sakurai, beat him soundly, took his Shuto 167-pound title. Like, it depressed me to see John McCarthy say that on air because he used to be a straight shooter. He knew better than what he was saying in the moment. And it just bums me out to see one more guy talking across camera that I can't trust to tell me the truth as he sees it.
Yeah. I think also too, let's point out one good thing about Big John in the commentary role for this event. How much nicer he is of a person than some others might have been. Because when Goldberg saw the Pitbull brothers sitting next to each other, and he says champion sitting next to champion, and he tries to think they both have different belts, and Big John corrects him, and he corrects him in a very nice way and kind of glosses over it. I just imagine if Dominic Cruz was the guy sitting in the other chair, and what that would have been like.
I wanted to bring him up because Ben brings up a great point about straight shooters because there's none left. Combate has none. Bellator has none. One championship has none. Joe Rogan used to be, but Joe Rogan isn't anymore. He's as biased as it gets. Like watching Aldo versus Marias,
Yeah,
DC,
man,
and Rogan were extremely biased. Is Dominic Cruz the lone straight shooter left? Because Paul Felder really isn't a straight shooter either. Hardy a little bit. I feel like Dominic Cruz and his awesome douchiness is the only straight shooter left in major MMA broadcasting.
He is the Western Hemisphere's last strategic stockpile of salt.
He's so
and he's got to bring it up for all of us.
He is Lot's wife with a championship belt around his waist.
All
right, fellas. So let's move on from here. Our next segment is just. Well, I guess we'll be doing this again in 10 years, but this is a look back at the decade. Is there a single knockout that is above all the others for you over the last 10 years, fellas? And let's open forum this one. What are you picking for your KO of the decade?
I mean, I'll jump out. I actually did some research and actually wrote down notes for this whole show. You're welcome. Now the one that for me in terms of significance, McGregor Aldo, because it really was like a transition point and a kickoff point to me of like the full on rankings don't matter BS era of UFC. Like brand before fighter ended to me that moment and went to become a fighter first league. And like McGregor beating Aldo kind of shut the door on being resume and, longevity and all those things that it mattered to be a main eventer and a top champion were gone. McGregor, talk your shit, knock people out, and that's the star. I feel like that was like a big moment in the sport, especially in the UFC. That one for significance, but in terms of just awesomeness, I mean, who doesn't love Overeem turning into Pez dispenser against Ngannou? I mean, that's the one for me. I can't forget that one. And then also Silva Belfort. I mean, that was nuts too.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many to choose from. Like, now for significance, I maybe I'm gonna lean toward Holly Holm against Ronda Rousey. And I say that because it derailed the hype train that was Ronda Rousey, but it also signified the true evolution of women's mixed martial arts, which I think happened once Ronda came around. It happened so fast that the sport for the women changed in such a short period of time, and that was the turning point where it was very clear that you couldn't be a one-dimensional fighter and succeed in women's mixed martial arts, and that was something that typically was the case up until that point. So that will probably be the one for significance. As far as just pure like Jesus Christ, what happened? I'm probably gonna go Masvidal versus Askren. And partly because I was sitting right there when it happened, so it is a personal memory attached to it. But to see a knockout happen so fast that it was the fastest KO in UFC history, yet it still wasn't the true, like it should have been clocked in faster because the ref was just on the other side of the cage because the fight just started. Like just seeing that was pure insanity, and the buildup of that particular bout with the jaw jacking between those two guys, and to see it culminate right before my eyes, it's something that I'll never forget. I thought about Barboza versus Terry Edom as well, just for pure awesomeness. Congo and Pat Barry, I think was one of the like crazy WTF moments. I mean, just walk on that word. I could cuss. One of the what the fuck moments.
Doesn't Barboza Edom feel like 20 years ago now?
That was 2010 or 2011.
Yeah, I can't
It
believe
was 2012, and I'm going to talk about it in about 90 seconds. So,
you got your countdown.
So Ben, tell me, what was your knockout of the decade?
I've actually been thinking about a lot about this one, even before the question came up in the list for this show, because, well, we're coming up on the end of 2019, and I am completely on board with both Jason's and Ant's suggestions. And I feel almost like a loser, like listing a knockout that it's quickly becoming the most frequently used knockout in the UFC's stock sizzle reel. But give me Barboza versus Edom. Like, once we've reached a certain minimum threshold of divisional relevance, because I mean, obviously, you know, I see insane knockouts at local shows every other weekend that are as disgusting as anything you see in a high level show. But if you're giving me at least, you know, top 15, top 20 people on the ladder of contention level fighters, it is still just one of it is the cleanest, most cinematic looking, perfect ballet of violence knockout that you have ever seen in this sport, even if you were there at UFC 1. Give me Edson Barboza doing the, you know, reverse spinning knockout on Terry Edom. It was insanely well performed. It was captured perfectly on camera. Edom was so dead on the moment it landed that it's actually depressing to talk about it, considering what the man has been through since then. I mean, it's one of the most perfect moments of violence ever captured on film. And we're subjected to it, you know, at least a half second of it a couple times a month. But yeah, give me Barboza versus Edom. That wheel kick was something else. And you know, if I'm still talking about this sport in 25 years, God help me if I am, it may still be the most perfect single technique knockout we've ever seen. And it happened in 2012.
Not a bad choice there, Jay. What ones did you have in mind?
Well, I'm gonna circle back to 2015, where the SureDog.com upset of the year happened, and I believe as anywhere from a 600 or 700 plus whatever underdog, Holly Holm shocked the world. Like, it's been touched on, so I won't dig into it all the way, but not only the aura of invincibility that Ronda Rousey had, but the fact that she had smashed almost all of her opponents in the first round and just done so without it batting an eye. I mean, multiple sub 15-second finishes of knockouts or submissions. She just had that thing, and she was becoming a movie star, and she was kind of on television, sort of, and she ruined an Expendables movie. So she was all over the place. And then Holly Holm came around as an underdog, wasn't afraid of it, didn't want to deal with it, undefeated as well, and kept beating her to the punch. And I rewatched this fight just to see all the beauty that happened, that her left hand kept finding the home on Ronda, and Ronda couldn't do anything about it. She would eat it, lean over a little bit, just 6, 8, 12 times, that left hand just boop, and Ronda just kind of shrugged her shoulders and tried to get away, but no, couldn't get away. Round 2 happens, Ronda falls into the cage, and it's that whole scene, and then they clinch up, Holly breaks free, left kick, just the head kick. That's that head kick, you know, that's, yeah, I picture the iconic close your eyes and see the knockout happening. I can see Ronda getting belted with that kick, falling face down. And that was a career. I mean, think of Burgos saying Conor Aldo was a career-changing moment for the positive for Conor McGregor. This was a career-destroying knockout. I mean, Ronda Rousey was never the same in competitive sports. She came back, a year or 2 years later?
A little bit, like a little more than a year later. Yeah,
she won the WWE
later.
Women's title. That was a huge bounce back.
She went, took some time off, had her pillow, and then fought Amanda Nunes because that's wise. And Amanda Nunes smashed her and sent her into wrestling, where I mean, you be the judge on if that's. She knocked her out so badly she made her a pro wrestler. For real.
Not to undercut my own selection, but your two choices are the ones that have defined the sport ever since they happened.
I think that's what stuck out to me, is that it was not only a changing of the guard, but it was the first. It was that one champion that is running through everybody, and people are just waiting and being like, "There's no one that's going to beat this fighter." Anderson Silva had that aura until Chris Weidman booped him. Fighters have had that. John Jones is kind of still riding that. Just that indestructible aura. And just boom, game over, man. And then just a total shift in everything. In the bantamweight division was never the same. Just everything that happened since then. That was a transformative moment.
I'll throw up one more, because since we've been shitting all over him this entire show, just to give him props. Chuck Liddell Rampage, that was like in the UFC was like a real paradigm shift from like the old generation to the next generation. Like Rampage, Anderson Silva, Couture in his second reign, Brock Lesnar, like that was like a shift. Like that was the end of the Tito, Chuck, Rich Franklin, Tim Sylvia era into like the new UFC era that really, then the UFC really took off to a whole nother level.
What year did that
he knocked
take
out
place?
Chuck in like 07 though.
Yeah, 08 or something like that, I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. God, that's right.
Vandy was in like 08. Oh yeah, Vanderlei Silva was 2000. 2008. It was UFC 92 in Columbus, right?
Damn.
Yeah, I think
or
so.
am I thinking of?
Close
I'm
enough.
thinking of 96. No, I'm thinking of 96 as the.
I just wanted to be
Anyway,
nice to Rampage, but okay.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't his decade. All right, so let's move on from this one now. It's not on the list, but the hell with it. I'm just gonna throw it in there anyway. What submission stands out the most to you in the last 10 years?
For me, there's just one. And it's not a crazy. And I might touch on this a little bit later, depending on where we go from here. Anderson Silva. Silva against Chael Sonnen, getting the crap beaten out of him for 5 rounds, throws up his legs, and Chael gives up the round and the fight's over. I thought I was just getting that anyway. It was just comeback of the century, all the things you want to name it. Chael had landed 430 something strikes on him, and then he got choked out by that triangle. That was just, again, close your eyes, picture memorable maneuver, submission, whatever it is. I see that one.
I'm leaning toward Korean Zombie's Twister over Leonard Garcia, and I think it's not only was it like I hadn't seen a Twister before. I didn't know what was going on, but what makes that moment stand out to me so much is the enthusiasm from Joe Rogan as it's going on, as the setup is happening, and you could tell it was like the fan in him came out in that moment, and it's like is that a Twister? Oh my God, it's a Twister! Oh my God, it's a Twister! Like that sort of crazy, just everyday guy reaction was fantastic, and that really makes that one stand out. So that'll probably be my submission of the decade.
I have to look. Well, you can go, Ben. I have to look it up.
Well, I don't have anything new to offer, so let me just jump in. I'm on board with Jay on this one. And the funny thing is, like, I totally feel where Ant is coming from, because that Twister, I mean, I'm old enough that I came up in like, high school wrestling and looking at college wrestling before UFC 1, before jiu-jitsu was really a well-known thing in, regular traditional combat sports circles. So what they call a twister in jiu-jitsu, we actually called a guillotine in amateur wrestling, when you have like, the leg right on the far leg, and you're kind of like, turning their spine like that. And it's never meant to pin the guy or score points. It's just meant to make him hurt and quit, and maybe like pin himself to like stop feeling pain. But yeah, like that's really all I had on that. on that. That's that was a remarkable moment for me, just because I saw someone pulling that. I saw Rogan like losing his mind at it. And Rogan is of the same kind of like age group and came up in the same era that I did. So I'm like, oh, is he gonna pull that off? And man, he did pull it off.
Jason, you any submissions you want to throw in the hat here?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's hard to think of it. Like I'll break it into just like interesting levels, and this always stands out to me. I think it was Yeah, Aljamain, Sterling, and on the same
Oh,
night, I'm looking it up.
yeah,
The
Sulev.
Nibar, a
the Nibar and the
228.
Sulev stretch.
Yeah, there was and the same night two people did it, which was bugged out because I have never seen that in like a major fight before that done. But like bringing up like the Chael and Anderson. I always love those moments like perseverance, and then someone works their game and gets a submission. And similar to that, maybe not as a big a deal to many, but it always stuck out to me. That was an impressive moment. And we were just talking about Holly Holm, Misha Tate beating Holly Holm, right following the Ronda Rousey fight because Misha Tate was pretty much losing that fight, but persevering, trying to work it, finally gets a takedown. And I always love when a person can persevere, get that one takeout and make it count. And then she made it count, got the back, got the submission, won the championship. Something we didn't think she would do because we figured the woman that destroyed Ronda, she's going to destroy Misha because Ronda destroyed Misha. So there's no way. But a classic MMA math moment and a classic perseverance moment. I always dig that stuff.
Very, very nice.
And if I may, like,
yeah, of course.
I mean, how different would the sport be if that had not happened, if that fight had played out the way it was expected to? Like, how different would that division look? How different would the next year or two have been? How different would it look now? And the same for what we were talking about with, Anderson versus Chael. Like, if Anderson Silva had not grabbed that triangle,
Chael got popped after that, right? So he would have
it would have been a vacated belt.
If Chael had just wiped out Anderson Silva 50-44, as it looked like he was about to, as he was 90 seconds away from doing, even if he got popped after that, even if it was vacated and Silva had fought someone else for a vacant title, how differently would everyone have been looking at Chael Sonnen? And how differently would everyone have been looking at Anderson Silva after that? Like, how different would that division be now?
Yeah.
John Jones was like a minute away from being a light heavyweight champ too.
Yep. Like, it's crazy what a formative fight that was. It's one of the last times, it's one of the few times in the last 10 years that I've jumped out of my seat and been screaming at my screen at the at the outcome of a fight was the first, Silva versus Sonnen fight. And if that had gone for just another 90 to 120 seconds, even if Chael had still popped afterwards and been stripped of the title, how differently would we have looked at everyone involved and the storylines that played out afterwards?
Let me jump on that and butterfly effect even more with that. Because let's say Chael would have won, then Anderson's aura would have been destroyed. Where would Chris Weidman be right now? Chris Weidman would not be getting all these main events and uber opportunities and being jumped into possible title shots in different divisions off of possibly getting a win because of his name value from being the man that beat Anderson. Like, how different would his career have been?
Weirdly, it's the best thing for the division that it happened the way it did.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Good points there. So, all right. So, fellas, so let's move on to our best fighter of the 2010s, or favorite fighter, or the guy, the guy or girl who defines the 2010s in MMA from your standpoint. Jason, I think I'll start with you on this one.
I went very boring. I didn't know we could put favorite fighter because then I would have changed my options. But I mean, it's John Jones. It's John Jones. Demetrius is 1A, and for me, a favorite fighter, it's Cormier's 1B. But it's John Jones's era. I mean, he's as divisive as a force as he is in the sport. There's just no one better. And it's the weirdest thing that in social media, when I try to make the point on this open forum that is Twitter, that he's the the best ever, and people shit on the division and he the light heavyweight division isn't the flyweight, the bantamweight. All right, fine, but this guy still beat legends. He beat Rampage. Anthony, you said it earlier, show that was the last time Rampage really cared, and he dominated him. He beat Rashad when Rashad was the best, his peak Rashad. The peak Rashad he fought was better to me than the Rashad that beat Chuck Liddell and beat Lyoto Machida. That was a better. He beat him dominantly. He beat, Vitor. He beat TRT Vitor. He beat Chael. He beat Lyoto. He choked Lyoto to sleep. Like, the stuff he did. He beat Daniel Cormier definitively twice. Like, it doesn't get much better other than Demetrius. But Demetrius did the same thing. The only thing is he didn't beat opponents that had legend value, but they were still very talented fighters. And then Daniel Cormier was the best fighter. Like, this decade was his entire career. His entire career, which started in 2009. This whole decade was his career. Like, he was the most interesting character. Now, fans hated him for no good reason. Then they finally learned, oh shit, this guy's really talented, actually pretty cool. Let's like him, and that changed. And what he done in the, if not for his losses to John Jones, he probably is number one just for the fact that winning titles in 2 divisions at the same time, beating arguably the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. This would be his decade, but John Jones it just did John Jones shit.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off a little bit of what you said just there, because in a world without John Jones, Daniel Cormier is the greatest fighter of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Cormier would be the clear GOAT if John Jones did not exist. But that being said, John Jones is also my fighter of the decade, and I think beyond just what he's done in the cage, because he's smoked pretty much everybody that they put in front of him, save for Matt Hamill. The only I think another thing that makes John Jones very important is the level of mainstream attention he's been able to garner. So,
yeah,
similar to Conor McGregor, bringing in a lot of fans, John Jones brought Nike into the sport. John Jones was also one of the first people to wear the Reebok logo. Like, he was able to bring in blue chip sponsorships that very few other fighters were able to get. Interestingly enough, he lost both Nike and Reebok within the same year, but he got there. I think also, too, the controversy makes John Jones a fighter of the decade, because he encompasses everything good and bad about a pop culture figure / combat sports athlete in the 2010s. And not to mention his more recent controversies as far as PEDs are concerned. It's led to a reform in how testing is done and how results are interpreted. John Jones, in a lot of ways, has been a trailblazer outside of the cage as much as he has been inside of it. So he's my fighter of the decade.
Let me add one more thing. This is how influential this guy is. He has forever added to the MMA lexicon picograms.
No, not that. No.
Forever, we will now know picograms because of this.
It's a word that grates like nails on a chalkboard. You guys are crazy, though. It's got to be Conor McGregor. I'm kidding. It's John Jones. It's John Jones, and it can't not be John Jones. And the points have been very eloquently stated already, so I don't need to rehash them. He's the fighter of the decade because of his accomplishments, his achievements, and because of his other issues he's had to deal with. The problems I don't want to say the problems he's overcome, but John Jones is John Jones' he's his greatest rival. I mean, John Jones is like 500 against himself. Like, he wins some, and then he hits a pregnant woman with a car, and then he tests positive for everything. And if the dude went 16-0 with a no contest for a failed drug test in the 2020s, I mean, he rebounded from a devastating loss to Matt Hamill and just ran through the decade. It was so impressive to see. Like, you love him or you hate him, you're going to watch him. I hopefully will have the pleasure of covering a John Jones event live in February with somebody else in the broadcast. And, it's one of those, he's one of those fighters that, a John Jones fight's going on. Like, I have an ex-girlfriend who knows about a John Jones fight. It's like, oh, John Jones? Yeah, I know who that guy is. Like, that's a very strange thing to hear, because he's one of those unusual guys who has transcended the sport for good and bad reasons, and not for getting into fights with people in bars and all those things. So, yes, John Jones.
All right, Ben, who's your fighter of the decade?
Everybody who's spoken before me has already laid it out pretty eloquently, but as Jay pointed out, the Matt Hamill fight was in December of 2009.
Sure was.
Since then, in the decade that we're talking about, John Jones is 16-0 with 1 no contest. That no contest happened to be a complete domination of the second greatest fighter of the decade. So great has been his dominance that fans of a certain emotional bent are clinging and clinging and clinging to a close decision that he won in 2013. Or are trying to find reasons that a somewhat close decision he had in 2019 were actually a loss for him. It's insane the length to which people are willing to go to try to argue that he is not as dominant as he has been. Even with his self-imposed absences for all of his out of the cage misadventures, he is so easily the most dominant fighter of this decade that it's ridiculous to argue for anyone else, even Demetrius Johnson. And Demetrius Johnson, when it's all said and done, he may be one of the 5 greatest fighters of all time. That's fine. He's not the greatest fighter of all time. And right now, meteor hits the earth, that fighter is John Jones. The run he had in the 2010s where he went, again, 16-0 with 1 no contest, and everyone he fought was at least a top 10 fighter, if not a top 5 fighter.
Yep.
It's ridiculous, the resume he has put together. And whatever I may feel about the character he has displayed to the public, the things he has done in his personal life that have bubbled up to the surface, it's all irrelevant. If we're just talking about accomplishment as an athlete, as a competitive athlete, as a combat sports athlete, he is the greatest fighter of the 2010s. And before it's all said and done, he'll probably be the greatest fighter of all time.
I mean, just to wrap this segment with a nice little bow, Ryan Bader, tough champion. Mauricio Shogun Hua, champion at the time. Rampage Jackson, the former champion, actually. What am I talking about?
Oh, yeah, and
Machida,
before you go
champion.
on with
Rashad,
Ryan
okay.
Bader, now double champion in Bellator. So
Oh,
Double champion in Bellator.
Ryan Bader, who we in the Sherdog weekly chat, there's a faction calling for him to be ranked in the top 5 at heavyweight.
Yes. Yep. I mean, you just keep going down the list. Rashad, champion. Vitor Belfort, champion. Chael Sonnen, greatest of all time. Alexander Gustafsson, number 1 contender. Glover Teixeira, number 3 contender. Daniel Cormier, he did something once. Just, it's crazy.
Quentin Jackson with visible abs.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
And what's crazy is that also, and Demetrius needs this kind of credit too, lost maybe if you add in the Thiago Santos fight and the DC fight, 8 or 9 rounds in 16 fights? 8 or 9 rounds? Maybe he lost? It could be possibly? Come on.
At absolute worst.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It could very well 4.
People are trying to make the case that he lost 3 rounds to Alexander Gustafsson in 2013.
Hmm.
And I don't even agree with that.
Yeah, at the time, I thought Gustafsson won that fight, but still, John Jones is the greatest fighter of the decade. You know, I mean, if we're obviously we're factoring in more than just the fights, although John Jones wins on the fights alone. But when you factor in everything, I mean, I'll accept Conor McGregor as an answer. I'll accept Ronda Rousey. But dude, when you're talking about outside impact, but John Jones touched on everything, which is why he deserves the nod, in my opinion. GSP also.
Those people both ended up fights in the 2010s face down on the canvas, having lost and being helped up. If John Jones had not pissed hot but died after the Daniel Cormier fight, he would still be the best fighter of the 2010s. Yeah. If he'd been run over by a truck on his way out of the arena in July 2017, he would still be the best fighter of the 2010s. It's not that close.
But would they have tested his blood from the crime scene?
It depends on if the person who ran him over was pregnant and had a broken arm.
But if it was just a hairline fracture, it's all good.
Oh, okay.
I just loved Ben and Jay's responses to the Conor McGregor mention. It sort of reminded me of when Anthony asked me about Dipset, and I didn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Who?
Yeah, exactly.
Dipset is the greatest rapper of the 2010s.
Just Jesus Christ, you three. Jesus Christ. Okay. Before I get really angry, you probably need to move on.
I'm just kidding. It's Pusha T, and it's because of 3 songs.
It's not Fred Durst. Come on, Fred Durst, Limp Bizkit.
Well, actually, somebody walked out to a Limp Bizkit song on
Yeah.
Bellator Japan. It's like,
Yeah.
what?
It was a Japanese guy.
Yeah, it was.
The boat bringing the CDs over there is going real slow, apparently.
They still got Columbia Records over there.
It's like, whoa, they still got Sam
taping
Goody.
the penny to the postcard.
Like, yo. Oh man, that was just super trash. All right, so now we're gonna move on to my favorite segment. Make sure I just had the clock up. Here we go, and that's called the speed bag. That is where I get to flex my authority on you mofo's. So, you have 10 seconds to answer the question. I will start with you, Jason,
You're not
because
doing fight of the decade.
that's a good point.
I mean, we can
Give him
skip
10
it.
seconds.
I don't mind, you know. Oh yeah, I mean, we do.
Yeah,
that
10 seconds. 10 seconds.
Yeah,
We should have, you know what? We should have speed bagged all these decade questions.
that would have been good too.
man.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's all good. It's all good. So you know what? This deserves more of a discussion because this is a decade discussion. What fight stands out the most to you in the past decade? And I'll start with you, Jason.
Is this on the 10 seconds?
No, no.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Oh.
Oh no, well we did fight of the decade though, didn't we? Oh no, when did I mention Aldo? Oh, knockout. I mean, for me personal, I always liked Gustafsson versus Cormier. I just always had an affinity for that fight. I know everybody looks at Gus and John Jones, and it probably is better. That always blew my mind. But outside of Gus, you know, and Cormier and Henderson and Shogun 1, that was just pure amazing. That was pure passion. That was like love, like hateful fight love in a cage. It was hot.
Oh,
All right.
okay.
Very, very sexual answer there, Captain Credential. Ben, what's your fight of the decade?
Give me Lawler versus McDonald too.
Mm.
I mean, it's a great fight by any stretch of the imagination, but there were points during the fight where those two were communicating on some level where I almost felt like an interloper or an eavesdropper for witnessing what they were going through as like two human beings, like testing
Ben's doing
their
more
physical
sexual
limits.
now too.
I didn't go sexual,
You went peeper.
but it was an amazing fight. It got to the heart of why we really watch combat sports, and it's to watch two humans kind of test their own physical and mental limits against each other.
It was hot.
All right, so we have all out, you know, gawking from Jason, and we've got voyeurism from Ben. Jay, what's your sexual fetish / fight of the decade?
Ooh, boy, I need to prepare for the segment a little differently. Let me unbutton this top button.
Ooh.
You know, I
Hold on,
mentioned it
hold
earlier.
on first.
No, you
let me
gotta
put
unbutton more.
hold on, I need to put my hand in my pocket. Continue.
So I something's happening up there in Texas. So looking forward to seeing that in a month. Anyway, I already touched on this fight earlier, so I'm not going to really rip into it again. When I think of a fight that stands out to me this past decade, you can picture the Crazy War, the Robbie Rory 2, Shogun Hendo, Jones Gus, Duffy and his shirt. You know, just the big slap, just knockdown, drag out fights. Okay. But I think of a fight that stands out that I picture forever because of impact or significance or whatever it would be. I would still have to go Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen. I think that this was that moment where Silva, the indestructible juggernaut who had been knocking out everybody or destroying or dancing around, you know, just having a grand old time, was not. Like it was the point that I remember going into some of these fights where the Anderson Silva defenders would talk about how his losses in the past, Ryochon and Daiju Takase, were flukes, were accidents, a flying scissor heel hook, despite the fact that Chonin was winning that fight up until the point. You know, they were flukes, they were crazy. Silva's the best that has ever done it. And then here's this trash-talking, clever wrestling type guy who comes in and got to him a little bit, put him on his back. It's not official, but I almost scored a knockdown for when he landed on Silva, when Chael landed on Silva and had him reeling, and he stumbled backwards, and it was just a destructive performance. And then minute and a half left, Chael hits that, or Silva hits that triangle, and it was just something. It was I had the feeling in my chest of it's over. The Anderson Silva era is over. Chael Sonnen destroyed it. He finally answered the question of what's he going to do against a wrestler that gets his hands on him and ruin him and ragdoll him. And it was over. And I was already thinking, okay, what are we going to do now? What's going to happen now? Because Silva's a god and Chael is, we've seen him, fight Paulo Filho and then fight Ghost at the same time. He didn't have that mojo. But then Silva hit the triangle and came back and won the fight. And it's just, dang.
And then Chael went full Ken Shamrock and tried to act like he didn't tap.
Well, no, he said he only lost that one round. Remember?
Yeah. He just thought he was giving
you lose the round.
In what world do you beat up a man for 24 minutes? He wraps his legs around your head for 10 seconds, and they call him the winner.
Master of trash talk. I'll put my my official fight of the decade is Lawler versus McDonald 2. Just an incredible, just emotional fight for both guys, and it encompassed everything that I love about mixed martial arts. And it had sort of like a Rocky vibe to it, just the back and forth nature. But I'm gonna just to mention this, I'm gonna highlight Ben Henderson and Anthony Pettis, their first fight that closed out the WEC. One of the underrated best fights of all time, definitely one of the best fights of the decade, and it marked the end of the WEC era where it was like that. Those just magnificent lighter weight cards that we could watch for free on Versus every Sunday. They were just so fantastic. And to see that era closed out was sad, but it also showed the future of the UFC in that fight. So that's one that deserves a little love on this decade-ending show as well. So let's move on to the Speedback finally, so I can flex some authority on you mofos. Now the clock is going to come right back up, and I am going to start with Jason because he was the one I wanted to start with originally. So Jason, you have 10 seconds to answer this question. What do you say to those that claim that Rampage took a dive against Fedor?
You may have something there. When the fight happened, there was a little itch in the back of my head that was like, I don't know. So this is the one time you people, you crazies. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Respect for the clock.
Yes,
truncated.
But Jason, I have to ask you one question though. Mm-hmm. What do you mean, you people? Ben, your turn now. You have 10 seconds. What do you say to those who say that Rampage took a dive against Fedor?
Dude, if he could have tapped out on Friday, he would have. There's no fix in here.
All right. And Jay, 10 seconds. What do you say to anyone who says that Rampage threw the fight?
Really? That's the Fedor fight that you think was fixed?
Okay, so Ben, I'll start with you on the next question. Pat Cummins announced his retirement, and how will you remember his career, and do you think he will come back? You have 10 seconds.
I don't think he'll come back. I will seriously think of him as quite a what might have been story, because he was a great wrestler, a serious freakish athlete, and could not get fights.
Respected the clock.
could not get fights early on in his career. Nobody wanted to fight this dude, and so he had 4 fights in his first 3 years instead of 12 or 14, and who knows what would have happened otherwise.
All right, with that long overdrawn answer there from Ben Duffy. Jay, you have 10 seconds. How will you remember Pat Cummins? Or do you think he comes back?
Really? No.
I was hoping you'd say that.
I was honestly surprised that he fought 13 times in the UFC. I mean,
all right.
But
Wow.
not to be. I need to tone it down a little bit because that sounded a little mean. Sorry, Ann. You know, he's 39, so we'll see him in Bellator next year.
That's right. Does Bellator have a Starbucks stand?
Wow. Wow. All right. I guess we'll move on to to you, Jason. How will you remember Pat Cummins' career? Do you think he comes back?
I only need like 3 seconds. Sorry to be mean, but
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow, that was cold blooded.
I liked his
Okay.
walkouts. He walked out to Grimes, and that was good stuff.
Well, all right. So, last question. I'll start with you on this one, Jay. Will PFL put on another women's lightweight tournament? And would your answer change if Kayla Harrison lost on Tuesday?
Really? You know, I mentioned last week that Tough should have a lightweight season, so this is a way to do it. But no, this wasn't competitive. No, I'm good.
All right. Okay, Jason. Will PFL have another lightweight tournament for the women? And does that answer change if Kayla Harrison doesn't win?
yes, they're gonna have another tournament. No, it doesn't change. They are fully invested in Kayla Harrison business.
All right. I'm sure a very informed answer. I know you're one of the go-to people for information about PFL. Ben, now, what do you think? Does the lightweight division for the women continue in PFL? Uh, and does that change if Kayla Harrison doesn't win?
Well, like most informed observers, I do expect Larissa Pacheco to step up and take out Harrison. You know, like she's a very
Oh.
live dog in this fight. But I think there's a season next year no matter what.
All right. Okay, so now let's see, and move the clock over to the other side,
Set mine up,
which
man.
means it is my turn to answer all three questions in 30 seconds. So, I am going to start the clock after reading the first question. So, what do you say to those that claim that Rampage took a dive against Fedor? I totally
Yep.
understand if that's what you think. I mean, he was bragging about taking a dive essentially on Instagram right afterward. He secured the bag. That's all he cared about. Patrick Cummins announcing his retirement. I mean, I don't really remember his career, but I'll say this: like a grappler who gets knocked out frequently sounds like a BKFC guy. And the PFL probably will stick around in the Kayla Harrison business. If that means creating a lightweight division, so be it. And there's the bell. Goodness gracious, I did it again. Now it is time to move on once again. So by the time we are airing this show, Rising 20 will have come and gone, including a lightweight tournament and two title fights. Anything in particular that we're all looking forward to from this event? Open forum on that one, Josh.
Yeah, I'll dive in real quick because I'm going to be here and I'm going to be watching this baby live as long as I can stay up. So I'll be watching this thing live till about 5, and then we'll see what happens, or the intermission kills me. There's one thing I want for post Christmas, and it's for an exciting, violent card. I want it to be fun and ridiculous to happen. They built this card as best as they possibly could outside of Gabby Garcia fighting another 50-year-old. I'm only half joking. This is one of those that I'll be glad to pull an all-nighter to watch it, even though I'll be fried tomorrow. It's going to be a little strange seeing Hiro Prochazka fight a non-title fight against. I mean, he's going to act as like a living elevator against CB Dollaway. So I don't understand why they're making this fight. But I want to see a few storylines. Can Rise and even the score? Right now it's 2-1 Bellator, and they have 2 more fights to go to see that promotion versus promotion thing, which I like that. Can Hamderlei Silva win the trilogy match after losing the first 2 against Ayaka Hamasaki? And can this lightweight tournament be as violent as it looks? Because, man, this really could be a lot of fun.
All right. I'm looking forward to the poster.
What a
I
dramatic
agree.
MMA.
I
Poster's
agree.
dope.
The poster, sure. Mhm.
I love the poster. Not looking forward to intermissions, but there are some names scattered around this card that definitely attract my interest. But I mean, quite honestly, I'm probably not going to watch this live because I've got to take my son to a newborn doctor's appointment tomorrow. So yeah, I can't stay up late for this one.
This is a. I'm trying to convince myself to stay up for this one. And unfortunately, the fight that really matters is the last one on the card. Ayaka Hamasaki versus Seohei Ham is the only kind of top 5 versus top 5 matchup on the entire card. Otherwise, I mean, you've got Satoshi Ishii, which, I mean, he is a New Year's Eve tradition. I believe this is his 6th or 7th like appearance on New Year's Eve in Japan, which that is saying a hell of a lot considering that probably everybody on this call remembers his debut.
Yeah.
Like the guy is like the giant tree in Times Square in New York City. He is a holiday tradition, but that doesn't mean he's fun to watch for a long time. Much like the tree in Times Square.
I've seen it in
So,
person.
I mean, check me the hell out of this one. Patricky Pitbull versus Luis Gustavo dos Santos should be a complete banger. And that's about what this has to offer. I mean, I want to see Miyu Yamamoto for sentimental reasons, but that's about it. I mean, Yuri Prochaska versus CB Dollaway is just it's a bad fight 5 years ago.
It's a bad fight all years ago.
It's a bad fight ever. Just yeah, I mean, put me out of my misery. I will be checking out highlights afterwards, and it makes me feel bad to say that about the New Year's Eve fight at the Saitama Super Arena in Japan, because that would not have been the case 15 years ago, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago.
All right, Jason, anything you want to add to this?
Nah, I mean, I plead ignorance. I mean, I don't follow Ryzen real closely. I mean, what the guys are saying, that those, they have me interested in those fights, but otherwise I won't be up watching it. I got to go to work and then the PFL championship till midnight afterwards, so I can't stay up for that.
Yeah. So actually, that's a perfect segue because I did want to go to you first about PFL. The championship, the finale of their second season airs tomorrow. You will be in the building covering that one live for sure, dog. So just some of your initial impressions of the card. Like, what are you thinking is going to be the standout fight on this? And what?
I mean, I'm always interested in watching Ray Cooper. I mean, this season 2, Ray Cooper hasn't been the thrashing wrecking machine he was in season 1 until that semifinal fight in the playoffs. So him versus Michaud on paper could be a really good fight, unless they all of a sudden want to wrestle, because Michaud actually has a fair amount of knockouts in his career. Ray Cooper likes the bang, and so that one is interesting. I agree with Ben. I think Larissa Pacheco is a really live dog. Even when I talked to Sarah Kaufman months ago before their fight, she thought Pacheco was one of the very best in the division, if behind her, of course, hyperbole for yourself. But, I think Pacheco the second time around, that could be interesting. Palmer and Alex Gilpin, I enjoy the fight just on a trivia level. I mean, that will be an MMA trivia. What two dudes fought each other 3 times in 7 months? And then in Lance Palmer's case, what dude beat another dude 3 times in 7 months in MMA? Also, Lance possible free agency, that kind of thing. Schultz versus Loic Abdazov, how you ever say his name. That's so. Rochot and Isaev's okay. Sorty versus Johnson is interesting because Sorty has just been nasty this season. So if he can wrestle, I mean, if he could stop Jordan Johnson's grind wrestle, then and he wins the title impressively, they have a really impressive. They have their Ponzinibbio because he's Argentinian. They have that star from another country who becomes like a legend from where they come from. outside of that, it's really pretty much Machad and Ray Cooper's the fight I'm most looking forward to. I mean, Brendan Launay makes his second fight, I believe, with the PFL, but it's solid fights, but not
We're looking for killers. Don't even talk about them.
He's just going to double leg the guy at the end of the fight, so
Yeah.
doesn't count.
Well, I will point out though that the guy that Lochman's fighting has lost his last 2 or 3 in a row, so he's not like like they're wanting to put, what do they call it? Oh, was it the new fighter showcase? I think is what they call them. Let's see how a guy is going to perform next year. Here's a non-tournament fight. Have fun, kid. When it's a clear mess match, and unfortunately they're setting up Lockton to be their featherweight, right? Yeah, they're the featherweight challenger to Lance Palmer. Yeah, I don't know. Burgos has enthusiasm that I wrote up an article, Prime Picks, just trying to break down these fights, and I would stay away from betting on most of these fights. I mean, you could take a flyer on Larissa Pacheco, and she's like what? I think she's like a plus 700 underdog right now. And Harrison's 1,300 favorite. So yeah, I mean, you guys might think Pacheco can win, but after their first performance, I don't see it. Alex Gilpin, obviously, we know he's going to totally dominate Lance Palmer after losing to him dominantly twice this year. Duh. As long as Rochalt doesn't Rochalt his way to $1 million, all right, because that's a 5-round heavyweight fight, and that can get real slow. I'm with Burgos. Micho Cooper has the potential to be a banger because Micho will not shy away from a brawl if he gets pulled into one. But there's some serious grapple heavy fights coming on this card. I really see well over 100 minutes of fight time total in this 7 fight card at 7 p.m. Eastern time on New Year's Eve.
I was there last year. Lewis Taylor banged it open with a great quick knockout, and then the rest of the card was just malaise. And it really. Also, I like to add, I don't like how they're trying to frame and build Brendan Launay as like this future star. I think they're putting too much pressure on that kid. Like, yeah, he did some good things. He's a nice prospect, but they're trying to build him and mold him like he's their Kayla Harrison, for the guys. And I don't really like them doing that.
Yeah, this is I think PFL will be very happy when this season is over. Like just bury this season because so many things went wrong.
Yeah.
Thing is I most likely will be watching this card live because I'm on the West Coast. It starts here at 4 p.m. I'm obviously not going out. Wife and I are going to be in with my kid, and we're just going to be sitting here chilling. And I'll turn it on. And I'll still have time to turn on whoever celebrity does the ball drop now in Times Square, and I'll still have time to look at that. So I'll enjoy it. It'll be some fun fights, I guess. And if it's not fun, then I'll just turn on something else. So, yeah, it's that simple. Ben, anything you want to add on here before we wrap it up?
No, I mean I'll be watching it as well. I'm legitimately interested in the fights. I'm looking to see if Lance Palmer will set some kind of record for most amount of money earned in a certain amount of calendar time for beating non-top 15 fighters. Like, he is certainly the grand winner of the PFL scheme so far. But I mean, that's about it. There's some interesting fights. They're granted additional intrigue because there's so much money on the line, but that's about it. And I was kind of joking about Pacheco's chances. She's toast.
Wow, thanks.
Burgos is shot there.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
No, I mean, she has avenues to victory.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Kayla Harrison has weaknesses, but I mean, it's almost like Ronda Rousey writ smaller. We know how somebody could beat her, but until somebody does, we're all riding the train. Yeah. Like, are you the one who's going to say that this is the time that somebody figures it out? If you were that person for Holly Holm, then you're very rich right now.
Yeah. All right. So we'll wrap things up with Buried Treasure. And this is where we share an MMA story that probably should have gotten a little more attention. So Jay, I'll start with you. What's your buried treasure this week?
Well, this episode, for some strange reason, feels like the John Jones love train, so we'll keep that rolling. So, over the holidays, John Jones donated about $20,000 worth of coats to Albuquerque homeless individuals for the holiday,
That's
and toted,
terrible. What?
yeah,
Oh, coats.
coats,
Coats.
coats,
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
coats. Anyway, yes, a little bit. So
Sorry.
we kind of discussed how he wasn't a great person this decade, and he's still a long way away from coming back around. But this goes a good way, even if whatever cynical reason we may address it, it's still a good thing to do. That's somebody in his position doing that kind of thing. Okay, that's a feel good story for me. Like last week, and Sean O'Malley donating his winnings from his video game tournament. That's okay, all right, good for you. That we need more of that in the sport, and so good for you, John Jones.
All right. Ben, what is your buried treasure this week?
I've got a lot I could talk about this week, but I'm interested in the fact that Dylan Dennis, a high-level grappler, fairly recent Bellator MMA signee, has scheduled his third professional MMA fight. It's going to happen on January 25th of this coming year. It's going to be against Keegan Genrich, and it's going to be in a 175-pound catchweight bout. As far as I am aware, this will be the first time that a fighter has ever fought 3 times in the modern era of MMA in a major promotion without ever fighting in an actual weight class. And understand that this is not bashing. I'm legitimately excited to see Dylan Dennis try his hand in MMA. If you were to give me the random MMA fan that thinks grappling is boring, I would say, hey, check this out, and give them a Dylan Dennis highlight reel. He's exactly the kind of grappler that should be a fantastic transition to MMA. But he's been at this for 2 years now. He's yet to fight in a real weight class. And by that standard, even by the standards of Bellator, which we've been talking about a lot over the last 2 hours, he's excluding himself from the natural ladder of title contention. So I don't know exactly what he's doing, but he's taking another fight at 175 pounds when presumably he could make 170, and presumably there are people who would be more than willing to fight him. And I know that for a fact because I've interviewed Logan Storley like 4 times at this point. And it takes a lot to make Logan laugh, but asking him if he'd fight Dylan Dennis makes him laugh. So I'm just wondering what the hell he's doing and what the hell Bellator is doing with him. But Dylan Dennis coming soon to a catchweight, borderline watchable fight on an over-the-top platform near you in January.
All right. Jason, what is your buried treasure this week?
I mean, I'll keep it on a PFL vibe since the championship's tomorrow. It's 2 things. One, on a total hawking with the wares bias, is I thought, Lance Palmer possibly being a free agent would be more of an interesting story, but no one seemed to care, unfortunately. On a other level, also PFL came out today. And, I mean, unfortunately, PFL is not going to get covered like other leagues, even with their championship happening. Kayla Harrison saying that she's one of the most highest paid athletes now in all of MMA, and claiming she's the highest paid woman athlete in all of MMA. I found very fascinating. And, talking about the lightweight division in PFL, yes, that is the proof that the PFL is completely in on the Kayla Harrison business and paying her very well. And business is a booming, I guess, for Kayla Harrison. So a little odd that I think she's in her 6th fight now. She's going into, and she's getting paid more than the legend she trained with. I don't know how true that is. It could be PFL hyperbole, but I thought that was pretty interesting. And, on a good level, hey, female fighters getting bigger pay, making more money. old Ben. Yeah, I thought that was interesting, her making the money she's making now. That was pretty fun.
All right, cool. Well, my buried treasure this week is about Jacare Souza, who is now, after going up to light heavyweight and putting on being half of one of the worst main events of 2019 against Jan Blachowicz, decided that middleweight is actually where he wants to be all along. So
How
he's
weird.
yeah, he's dropping back down to fight Uriah Hall, and part of the main card for the Tony and Khabib fight. If that actually happens this time, I think that's UFC 249. So, whatever. I'm just tired of talking about these weight cuts. I probably shouldn't have picked that for Barry Treasure. Ugh. Ugh.
Damn you, Adonis. Damn it.
Yes, Adonis has me quite distracted. So, all right, fellas. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Unleashed, which concludes 2019, concludes the 2010s, but doesn't conclude my love for you out there. Yeah, that was kind of silky smooth, wasn't it? I know. Thank you. Jason, let the good people know where they can find you and your work.
As always, SureDog.com. There's a few interviews I have up now on SureDog with finalists from the PFL Championship tomorrow night in the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden. I talked to Lance Palmer, I talked to Ray Cooper, I talked to Jair Rochelle, and I talked to David Rashad. All interesting, fun interviews. And also to add to another PFL tint, I talked to WWE legend and Hall of Famer Mick Foley. He was at the PFL press conference on Friday. He's involved with the league, I guess like doing a celebrity cameo stuff for them and cool with Leland Garcia. So all PFL related stuff. If you need some PFL primer for tomorrow night, find those on SureDog.com. And, there'll be more stuff. I'm probably going to have a bunch of UFC 246 stuff coming in the next few weeks. So look out for that on SureDog.com.
All right. Jay, sure, you'll be on play-by-play for the upcoming cards. Am I right on that?
No.
Oh.
I am tapping out when it comes to. No, I have luckily, mercifully, I am not running play-by-play until Conor McGregor Donald Cerrone card, which is in mid to late January. You can find me right down here or at SureDog.com. You hit the features tab, and I'm right there. I'm writing betting odds pieces, stat pieces, preview pieces. I mean, I'm everywhere in the MMA world you need me to be, but I'm going to be taking a few days off in January because this has been a heck of a stretch.
All right. Well-deserved time off for you, Jay. Ben, where can we all find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy. I am a senior editor at SureDog.com. You can find me in the features drop-down menu under my own name, where most recently I wrote a snarky piece about Bellator Japan, where I doled out praise and criticism in equal measure. Other than that, you can find me here every Tuesday.
Very nice. All right. So, of course, I'm Ant Walker. You can find me on the Walkout Network. That is the exclusive home of Anthony Walker's mixed martial arts rants and raves. But also, I did an appearance on the Slip and Dip podcast as well with the homies Matt Wells and Kendrick Johnson. So check that out on their channel as well. They have a fantastic show every week. So I would suggest you guys like and subscribe to them. Like and subscribe to us. Share it. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. And in the meantime, you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. You got to look forward to 2020. And through it all, you've got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace. I'll just see you next year, I probably should say, or the next decade.
And really screwed me by that Pacheco thing.
I've already cut this shit off tomorrow.
We'll see you next Tuesday. Yeah, it'll work fine.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever. I'm back to work. Fuck it.